more dramatic. But hello.
We could do that. We could do that now. Has anyone got any music that they could play while we come on?
So, or can you,
You could hum. Can you hum something?
Can you hum something?
Can you just do that? After three? 1, 2, 3. Right, we're going to go off there, and then when you do that music, then we'll know it's time to come on. Is that all right? Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3. Ah, yay! Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's always lovely to come on to a spontaneous fanfare. Thank you so much for thinking of it. Thank you for bringing that energy.
Oh, and thank you for turning up to this, even though you didn't pay for your tickets, and so.
And there's drum and bass and spliffs all over Bristol. So thank you. We appreciate that. We thought it might be a little quieter, so we're thrilled that we've got some people to spend the next hour with. Thanks. We are Hot Poets.
I always say obviously, and if you've come for Hot Poets, you're not going to be disappointed. But my name is Liv Torc.
And I'm Chris Redmond.
And we run a project called Hot Poets. And this project basically is a climate change poetry project, but it works on the principle of working with scientists, amazing change makers, finding the people around the world that are doing the incredible work to actually get us to a better place and helping them. So we don't really come from a place of protest. We come from a place of how can we as artists really support getting to a better future. We've been doing this project since 2019, 20-ish, and it started in a muddy field in Glastonbury. Just going to take you back. We're in a muddy field in Glastonbury. It's 2019, and me and Chris are watching some dystopian doom poetry about climate change by a very successful poet. And there are thousands of people watching, so you can tell could only be 2 people. There are thousands of people watching, and this poet uses the immortal line, "We're dead, and every part of me knows it." And and the whole audience sort of sunk into the mud. The sort of depression sort of lifted, and it didn't lift, it sort of, it's like a cloud all over us. And me and Chris looked at each other and thought, maybe there's another narrative, maybe there's another story we could work with here, so a different approach.
At about the same time, I came off stage at a gig. I run this thing called Tung Fu, and a woman came up to me and said, "Have you ever written anything about climate change?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, bits and pieces, but I don't really know how to do anything other than that." And she went, "Well, do you want to have a conversation?" So we met and we had a chat. And she works at the London School of Economics. Her name was Michal Nachmani, and she was in charge of the world's database of the most polluting companies, right? The 500 big ones, the ones that got us into this mess. And I was immediately impressed because she was in charge of the world's database of something. And I said, "Well, what do you do with that?" And she said, "Well, we use it as leverage, to sort of try and encourage shareholders to kind of pressure the companies they invest in to change their behavior, divest, invest in renewables, stop investing in fossil fuels." And I said, "Cool, how's that going?" Expecting her to go, "Oh, it's really hard and nobody's doing it." And she went, "It was going better than I could have possibly imagined." And I went, what? That's not a story I know. Tell me more. Tell me more. And we had more conversations about more scientists and more projects that I had no idea about, of extraordinary changes that were happening at pace. And this sort of fed into this conversation that Liv and I were having about what are the other stories other than we're all doomed and every part of me knows it.
Because there's amazing scientists all over the world doing incredible things, and they're writing papers about answers and solutions. And only 9 people are reading those papers. And yet we're getting those... there's the laughter of recognition from some academics over there. But we're constantly getting the stories of it's all over. And yet there are so many other stories that we wanted to tell. And I had a poem out in 2019 called The Human Emergency. And I did write a lot about climate change, and still do, obviously. And that poem had been really successful when it sort of was it was about me as a mother and how my fear and anxiety around climate change, but also about whether we're really asking the right questions. And it went really viral, and loads of people were really engaged by it, but it also had this impact. It was used in protests in Australia, it was put into a concert in Philadelphia, and it was like, wow, spoken word, if we hit the right thing, that can actually inspire action, which is, I think, what we're really interested in. We're not interested just in views and likes, we're interested in how can poetry make a real difference and inspire action in the world. And we dreamt up Hot Poets, and then COVID happened and we put Hot Poets down. And then we picked Hot Poets up again. And
we got some money from the Arts Council, just like that.
It's really easy.
Yeah.
Bigger laughter of recognition.
Yeah. And we partnered 12 poets with kind of 12 organisations who were doing cool stuff in the climate and environmental space. So we work with the Met Office, we work with the RSPB, we work with the London School of Economics, with Through Macau, with small projects like kind of community projects in South Africa and really big kind of international projects. And the mission was work with the partner, write about the work we're doing, explore the other stories. And we made 12 poems and 12 films, and we released them one a day throughout COP26 in Glasgow. And we're going to talk about this. We're here to sort of show you a bit of the workings of what we've been doing, and also share some of the poems, and we're going to talk you through the process of what we've been doing.
What's happened to us in the last 3 years, because it's been quite amazing. So I'm going to let Chris have the stage.
So when we were looking for partners, I read this article about an organisation called the Weathermakers in the Netherlands, and they have a plan to regreen the Sinai Peninsula, which is a vast area of desert in northern Egypt. And it's based on stuff that has already happened, like the Chinese have done it, in this sort of vast desert landscape, about the size of the Netherlands, weirdly enough. They sort of regreened it. In about 20 years it took them, reinstating water cycles. And they had this really ambitious plan to do that. And I was like, that's nuts. How can you do that? I love the ambition of it. It was kind of superhero kind of vibes. You can't possibly do that. Can you possibly do that? Yes, you seem to be able to possibly do that. And so I wanted to write a poem about that. So I spent some time talking with them, learning about their work. And this is that poem. And it sort of sums up a little bit about the kind of whole mission that we're on, really. So this is about that project. It's called Green Futures. The Earth is Waiting. Sometimes you have to think big and small at the same time. A grain of sand on your finger, or staring at a beach, a raindrop in a jar. At the northern point of the Sinai Peninsula, connecting Egypt to Asia, is a lake called Bardawil. 10,000 years ago, it's tens of meters deep. A bird and fish fest. Green mountains blessed with rivers like arteries. Plants breathe, winds, bless you. Winds lift the sea's mist. Gift this Eden with all the rain it needs. Life is abundant. Our ancestors do what our ancestors do. They farm, graze, plant crops, cut trees, grow their wealth and families. They take and sow and cut and grow until there aren't enough trees left to catch the wind or shelter from the sun. Rains slow, soil dries, animals overgraze. Increasingly, it's more heat haze than sea spray. Fewer plants grow, soil washes down hills, fills up the lake. Today, it's 1.5 meters deep. It's too salty and hot for fish. Rivers are dry. Garden is desert. But we know more than those who've come before. We have microscopes. We peer at isotopes and organisms, study Earth's regulating systems, and some have learned that soil is not necessarily dead. It may just be sleeping. Well, what if we could wake it? There are maverick engineers with magic eyes, looking big and small, examining weather patterns, soil composition, the position of the lake, and they think they've found what it takes to reboot this Eden. Sediment, fertilizer, sleeping in salt water. Step 1, wake the lake. Dredge it, flush cool water in, hot water out. Fish will flourish. Plant salt marshes and wetlands. Their roots will activate the soil. Birds will return. Step 2, regreen the land. In rows of greenhouses, desalinate the sediment in sun-powered water tanks. Flush with algae, plants, bacteria, insects, tiny fish, each a giant petri dish of everything life needs. Each greenhouse seeds the steamy scene for a self-sustaining system. And when that system's on its feet, move each house, repeat, reboot the soil, sow a patchwork of green. Step 3, change the weather. fog nets, capture moisture from the air, hold it there, make it rain. Dikes and dams are dug to send it where it needs to go. Streams begin to flow. The water cycle knows exactly what to do again. We dig fields, plant crops, graze animals. Within decades, they say, from desert to garden, extracting gigatons of carbon, catch the winds, make them blow a different tune, let flowers bloom again. Earth is abundant if we let it be. Perhaps we just need to look differently. All the keys are here. Imagine a future we love rather than one we fear.
Imagine. It's amazing hearing that poem again and knowing what happened with that poem as well, which you'll hear later. But that first round of poems, we had these 12 poems, and we were matched with organisations, mainly in the UK, but also in Africa and in Egypt. The Weathermakers was one of them. And it's really lovely, because we're going to introduce Vanessa Kisuule, who hasn't been in any of our Hot Poet shows yet. And behind us, you see, this is an array of our incredible poets that we've worked with over the last 3 years. And Vanessa is in the bottom line there. And we've been so fortunate to have so many amazing poets bring to life these stories of hope. And Vanessa worked with the RSPB, and she's going to tell you about that. Can you just give her a massive round of applause? Vanessa Kisuule.
Hello, everybody. Hi. I've not got much time. I've got so much to say about the experience I had working with RSPB, because I'm a nascent ornithologist. I've decided to be really into birds recently, after I got obsessed with what are those bright green birds? See, I'm so bad at retaining the names. Yes, the parakeets that are really prevalent in West London and all these different areas. So it felt serendipitous to then be connected with this charity that works with the birds of the UK. So essentially, I got to hang out on a massive peat bog, and it was really interesting when they told me that, because I thought that maybe we'd be going bird watching, you know, I'd get my binoculars out, like all that sort of stuff. And they were like, no, we're going to hang out on a peat bog. And I was like, okay, cool, you're going to have to sell me on this, like, you know, wagwan, how's this going to go? And it's amazing, isn't it, how there's all these different specialities in the world, and when you're ignorant to them, you have no idea that there are people that have given their entire lives to something that you just never even think about. It's like the most humbling, profound thing, right? I'm living my life, I'm writing poems, I'm watching Married at First Sight, you know, dumb things like that. And then there are people that have given years to thinking about carbon capture in a peat bog. And thank goodness they have, right? Because this is one of many aspects of what we need to be thinking about as far as climate change and reversing some of the damage we've made. So it was this landscape unlike anything I've been to before. And, you know, what was wonderful is that the people that took me on the tour there talked about how it doesn't have an easy beauty. We talked a lot about Wuthering Heights and, you know, the landscape of that book, and how a peat bog is tumultuous and strange and almost hostile to the human initially, it seems. You know, in many ways, it's literally trying to soak you up into itself, right? We had moments where I was, you know, almost knee deep in the peat, but it also has this untamable energy to it. This really wonderful, wild, untamed energy that is beautiful once you learn to embrace it for its own terms. And as they started to explain all of the things that are happening in this environment and how all of it is so particular as far as all these different aspects of, you know, how the birds can survive when there's the right amount of moisture in the environment. And because we've been taking all the moisture out for years and years and years to create farmland, et cetera, we've lost a lot of these peatlands, and what they're trying to do is try and bring that back. They used to use a lot of peat in fertilizer, and what's great now is that essentially they don't sell fertilizer with peat in it anymore. So this has been one of the easier things to try and achieve in the climate change fight. So that was really, it was really galvanizing to hear that actually there are things that have been actioned and done, right? And yeah, just being in that environment and trying to decide how I was going to inhabit it in a poetic way was a challenge. But I love a challenge. So this was the poem that resulted, and it's called The Earth's Thirst. And as the quick comma of a bird skims the air, some secret it doesn't care to share with us on its wing, I think of how we're stood on history right now, in all its wet, thick murk, the past muffled under grass, the then, the now, the threatened potential after. I imagine I'm Kate Bush, the wind whipping long braids against my face, yet fear cannot find me amongst the heather's stoic bristles. The whistle and slap of air is mighty, and I bow to it, humbled. The ghosts of birds departed haunt the hills. What once shook and bellowed wheezes. What took centuries to build must reconfigure in less than 10 years. A finger points to the cracks, the crumbling sigh of soil. Look, we must put back what we took. Kept wet, this brooding land will keep its brutal beauty, sit fat and proud, just set jelly, gleaming like scheming obsidian, hold carbon close, slake the earth's thirst, reverse the worst of our choices. Though so far away from the knot of city life, the neat shaven grass of botanical parks, this place knows our deepest need. All we must do is feed it. The ground bounces under me, twice swallows my wellies, my breath. Yet hope finds me here, mouth a furrowed O, shrink back tongue. I am dumb, I am holy, I am sorry, big, grim, gorgeous bog for all the bad press, the stress of all our unchecked greed. Here, a poem in penance, a long, slow drink for your troubles. Thank you.
Vanessa Kisuule. That was so wonderful to hear that again, Vanessa. Thank you. Thank you. I was taken deep into the bog. We made these 12 films. Vanessa's was one, my Egypt one was another, Liv did one, and we had all these amazing poets, and we were lucky enough to be invited to COP26 with the Met Office to do a presentation. And while we were there, we were introduced to this little kind of renegade band that sort of hunkers under the UNFCCC banner. The UNFCCC, they're the people who organise the COPs. That's the climate change bit of the UN. And this project was called Resilience Frontiers. And Resilience Frontiers was a kind of a think project, a kind of a hive mind project where they gather together amazing scientists like indigenous academics, architects, futurists, super brains from around the planet, all the continents, and they map out imagine a future kind of 2050 in which we've solved all of the super wicked problems. That's their phrasing.
Super wicked is
wicked.
a phrase that is used a lot in the
Yeah.
climate space by the
And
UN.
none of them did that. There was not an ounce of irony in their super wicked. So they get these people together and they work out the pathways that we need to take to this 2050, this utopia, if you like. And we met. It's run by this guy called Youssef Nassef, who's the head of adaptation at the UN, and he's like this sort of super wise Egyptian Yoda. And in the first conversation I had with him, he was kind of talking about how they were actively engaging sci-fi writers to try and find out how they could encourage them to write less dystopias and more utopias, and this sort of naming of artists and the kind of wider cultural kind of scene in different, around the world as having the potential to impact. And I was a bit blown away by that. Here's this like super high-powered diplomat who's right up there in the UN talking about how important artists are, and I think that for me was a change moment where I switched from always assuming the position of artist as kind of protester, standing on the outside throwing stones, to kind of him saying, no, we really need you guys, because you're the one, this is your bread and butter. You work with the imagination. And a lack of imagination has got us into this mess, and we're going to need imagination in extreme to try and find a way out of it. So they kind of invited us in. They took us under their wing. They took us to the next meeting of the Resilience Frontiers in Botswana for kind of Global Adaptation Week. And I performed that poem about Egypt. And Youssef came up to Liv afterwards and went, "Can I have a copy of that book? I'd like to give that poem to the president of Egypt." And we were like, "Yeah, cool, no problem."
£10.
Yeah, £10. Do you know the printing costs? So as far as we know, the poem was given to the president of Egypt, and we went back to COP in Egypt that year, and the weathermakers were there, and because we were there with the UN, we were able to use our blue zone privileges to get the weathermakers into the blue zone and spend more time there, and they got diplomatic sign-off from the Egyptian government to begin the process of regreening the Sinai Peninsula, and I like to think it's all entirely down to my poem. I joke, obviously, but it played a part.
Yeah.
It played a part, and that kind of also blew my little mind a little bit. And then we began to just go, okay, these things have actual power in the world.
Well, stories have power, right? They're much more engaging, and to tell these stories of what the world could be like, that for the Egyptian government was more exciting. That was an amazing that was a jaw-dropping outcome of being at COP27. The UN took us to Botswana, they took us to COP27 in Egypt, and because we were there running workshops, sort of doing what we do there, they really, really liked what we were doing and what it meant to bring arts to these spaces. And we started from there, COP27, with a year-long partnership, which was to bring to life these 8 pathways to a better future through different poetry commissions. So that's what we've been doing. So we got another Arts Council grant.
Just like that.
Really. Easy. And we also started working with the Gaia Foundation on a project called We Feed the UK as well, sort of in sort of parallel to each other. So for the last year, since last June, we have been working on Hot Poets International, which is bringing to life examples of these different pathways. And these are the things that we have to do to reach a better world. And the first one is reconnecting to nature, revisiting Indigenous knowledge, sort of really, the second one is sort of lifelong learning for environmental stewardship, which is just learning how to look after the planet. And all these kind of pathways made so much sense until we got to the ones about big data and those things. But it was amazing to bring them to life. So we made individual commissions in different countries. We made one in Thailand, we made one in South Africa, and we made some global commissions, and we ran some participation projects as well. So lots of things over the last year. We're going to show you a bit of that work now. So
we're going to show you a film. This is a commission that we made with an artist in Bangkok called Blue Ratchapradit. I had to check my notes for that. And she was commissioned to work with a kind of landscape architect called Kochakorn Vodaakon. And Kochakorn is kind of quite a big deal.
She's a rock star, of the landscape architecture.
Bangkok is basically sinking. And what she's done is kind of created these huge, big public parks that capture the flood water and then recycle it in the dry season to kind of water gardens or paddy fields or whatever. And she's doing more and more and more of it. So
we met Koch in Botswana, and Chris came up to me and said, "Oh my God, you have to see what she's
massive.
doing."
It's so impressive.
And then we got to actually get a poem made the following year about her work. So that was also incredible. So we're going to show that.
This is about a bit of work that Kochakorn has done, where she's taken. Bangkok is a city of canals, and so many of them are overgrown, and they've become foul and unusable. And the piece, I guess, is about the kind of reclaiming the kind of Bangkokian relationship with water in a positive, healthy way. And so Kochakorn has kind of regreened this huge kind of canal and made a park. And so this is a piece. That's enough talking about it. Let's just show the poem.
My darling, you tell me that this city leaves you lonely. I want to tell you, it's not your fault. You cannot breathe. Bangkok hasn't been made for the likes of us, creatures nursing a thirst we cannot name. The modernists made a mistake. They forgot that Bangkokians are amphibians walking on two legs. Our ancestors lived with one foot in the dirt, the other in the water. They built canals so that the city could breathe. Started out as moats to slow down armies, then came the trade routes and the boathouse, then the children swimming before they knew how to speak. Our klongs, once blood vessels that cleansed us, are now left contaminated, amputated, resources regulated to make room for roads, cement, paving over water like graves. And now the rainwater doesn't know where to go. We panic when it's wet season again, waterphobic as we watch the ghost of the 2011 flood shiver in October rain. Now as sea level rises, Bangkok is sinking 2 centimeters every year. But a wise woman once told me that it's inhumane cities that turn seasonal change into seasonal disaster. So when I told her that our city is drowning, she answered with parks designed for the sinking, reimagined klongs rejuvenated by rerouting water flow, borrowed from wetland wisdom to dance with the seasons, carved retention pools for when flood arrives, and made sunset theaters out of SkyTrain skeletons. Through her eyes, I see this biophilic regrafting where by the time it's 2050, Bangkok is porous and amphibious enough to ride a rising ocean. Parks filled with great trees, root systems to stop torrents, terrace gardens growing fruits for the plucking, roads cracked open, klongs resurrected, filled with water so clean you can drink from. A future more jungle than concrete, where streets beckons the name of songbirds as 1,000 words for living beyond survival. Our children would know by the hums of cicadas joining the chorus of sun-powered engines. Our existence is dependent upon all that is alive and breathing, every whisper of a wingbeat, every flutter of a fin. My darling, you are lonely because you have limbs aching for soil, where us and pomegranates are made and unmade in the same language. So the next time you cannot breathe, know that in Cheongnon-si, an urbanist made you a seat. Glimpse here a future where nature is at the center. Humans no longer owners, but cohabitants at the service of fragile and precious things. A spot for us to return klong-bound, to nurse that thirst we're yet to name.
I love that poem. And Blue's poem represented the Pathway 6, which was the regreening of cities and well-being and looking after our population. Since, it was great because that film was aired in the Thai Pavilion at COP28, and that was amazing, and Koch was able to see that and be part of that. And it's been really incredible to see these sort of film stories being told in these spaces. The next thing is that part of telling these 8 pathways, we did a big participation project, and some of you were involved in it actually, and that was we invited people to really explore these different ideas of the future. It was a big thought exercise. It's quite hard to put yourself in the future and backcast, but we looked at 4 of the pathways, and we're going to show you a film of that. And we invited people to send us haiku about the future they'd like to see, about what this future could be like, and photographs from around the world as well, which we matched and turned into films. And we made 4 of these films, and we had about 4,000 people participate in this project. And again, we took these to COP and shared them, and we shared the haikus, and we were able to share the ideas of hundreds of people with the delegates at COP and really talk to them about these different ideas for the future. And the film we're going to show you was the last one we made, and that was Pathway 8, which was, oh, can you remember what it is? Something, it's
about financial systems.
It's about,
Greening of the financial system.
changing basically the whole capitalist structure and creating new financial systems, which we need to do in order to have a better future. And this is what these amazing participants came up with. that's the future, right? If we cannot manifest what we cannot imagine, and it was our job to imagine these amazing futures, and so many people joined in to help us do it, and all of these things are possible. What we've learned on this journey is that we can still do it. It's not over. Whether we have the impetus and political will is another question, but we definitely know that the science and the will and the innovation is there. So alongside looking at the finances, looking at reconnecting to nature, looking at what happened to happen in our cities, we embarked on a project with the Gaia Foundation called We Feed the UK, and that was about regenerative farming. Anyone here familiar with regenerative farming? I've learnt so much about regenerative farming in the last year, I can't even tell you. But we placed 10 amazing poets with regenerative farmers all over the UK, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, to tell these stories of these smallholder farmers, these community farms and these regenerative farmers, so that we could sort of present a kind of picture of Pathway 7, which is regenerative farming. And sort of after I learnt about it all and spoke to some amazing farmers, I like farmers a lot, and I had a great chance to meet a few. I went to the UN really naively and I said, I think I know what's going to do it. I think I know what could save the world. And they said, yeah, what? And I said, I think it's regenerative farming. And they said, yeah, it is. And I don't know, just to give you the top line of why that is, how much percentage of the UK do you think is farmland? You've obviously, you know. Yeah, it is, like, right, 71, 72. 50% of the habitable world is farmland. There are 608 million farms globally. Farmers own the land of the world, and people who own landscapes can make change at landscape pace. And when I spoke to an amazing farmer who's been advising us called Martin Lyons, who's head of the Nature Friendly Farming Network, and I said, would this work? How long would it take? And he said, if all the farmers just turned over 20% of their farmland to regenerative practices, to rewilding and regenerative farming, they could halt and turn around biodiversity loss within 10 years. I mean, it is that fast because they own the land, and nature regenerates so quickly and is so powerful. So there is hope. Whether that will happen is obviously another issue, but it's a really big thing. So to explore this subject with so many amazing poets across the UK has been incredible. And yeah, just to promote that highly, just learn about regenerative farming, and because it does have the power to make a difference. And we've got one of our 10 poets, haven't we, here? Have we? Do you fancy switching and doing your COP poem? I can do, yeah. Dizraeli up after that. Yeah, as farmers operate in their own time zones, right? So I've set up for the wrong poem. I'm just going to rewind. So yes, one of our poets is, Hot Poets is not yet in the building, but will be very soon. So back to COP. Because me and Chris have been to the last 3 COPs, and we've been in the blue zone, which is quite unusual. Not very many artists or writers. The blue zone is where all the boring policy stuff happens. The green zone is where all the amazing artists and innovators, and you can buy tickets, and it's a free-for-all, it's a Mardi Gras, it's much more enjoyable than the blue zone. But the blue zone is where a lot of the talks happen, a lot of the debates, a lot of the scientists go. And me and Chris have been in there the last 3 years, and we've learnt a lot. And one of the amazing things that happened as a consequence of what we did in Egypt was that there was so much more focus with the Resilience Frontiers on the arts when we went back to Dubai. And so we went to Dubai. Anyone been to Dubai? It's quite a weird place. For someone who got so enthusiastic about farming then, Dubai isn't necessarily my favourite kind of place. But we had a really interesting experience every time we go, and I wrote a poem about COP that I wanted to share because it's almost like we've peered behind the curtain of another world, and I want to share a little bit about what happens, because there's a belief that it's just all these governments sitting around a table not making good decisions, and COP is something beyond that, and it's kind of not set up to save the world, it's sort of set up to progress an agenda. But although there are these policy meetings happening, and I can honestly tell you the people who come out of those meetings, I've never seen such miserable, worn down, ground down. I've never seen people so haunted as the people in the discussions, the policy discussions at COP. But on the outside, you've just got these awesome people from all over the world, and everyone there wants to do something incredible. So this is my poem I wrote coming back from COP, and it's called COP28, A Little Help Down Here. He says, if you were told the human race had 7 years left to live, what would you do? It's 27 degrees again, dust haze deluxe, the coffee flavor of the discerning COP delegate. We ride tiny Tesla boats through swirling concrete currents in a city shitting skyscrapers. Think up and up through see-through ceilings, glide past oil fields squatting behind electric peacock trains. In Expo City, we are funneled like hamsters in a pinball machine, moving without moving. Perspective has been tampered with. I never thought it was possible to get vertigo on the ground. He waves his fork at the next table where Exxon lobbyists scoop hummus onto triangles of bread. So do we. They won't be able to live here in 30 years, he says. The whole region will be a fan oven. He tells me he is planting underwater gardens in the Arctic, grafting coral, letting citizens dive down to seed seagrass. We celebrate the mangrove breakthrough, toast 15 million hectares with 7-Up. Things are changing, he says. No one is waiting for the politicians. Finance is flowing. But it's too late. His words are throwing stars, but his eyes are luminous submarines submerged in deep, moving currents. I push my sandals into the shiny sidewalk, pummel the invisible brake pedal through the lead in my stomach, through my children's future. If we can just slow it down. The corporates are mobilizing. High heels click across marble and lino. What does 1.5 degrees look like, branded on their perfect teeth? I follow them into PowerPoints, lose my head in acronyms and carrot stick cliches, stumble out of half-empty pavilions, blinking in bright sun. Anna tells me she is climbing into campus clothes bins across LA, taking selfies on the unworn leather pants rich girls can't be bothered to return. Her thrift shop, slow fashion business booming. I ask her what she would do if nothing could stop her. Nothing can stop me, she says. That's what it's like here. More problem solvers than insects, Einsteins and oxymorons shooting up adrenaline in the climate stripes. Christina wears her smile like she's just found it. In the Spanish mountains of her hometown, they only have water for 4 hours a day now. She protested when they cut down forests for supermarkets. Her friends say, why bother? Just enjoy your life while you have it. So she left them. I watch her chatting to policymakers in plastic chairs, like all the light belongs to her, UN badge glinting. Delegates from Senegal, China, Pakistan, Cameroon wander in and sit by a fire we have made with our words. Everyone has a superhero origin story, a message from their homeland, blood on their treasure maps. 1,000, 100,000 people in a shed at the bottom of the UAE trying to fix the lawnmower, make it run on hope and Chinese solar power, while snake oil sellers gather outside like the witches from Macbeth. There are journalists talking into microwaves. This is the most complicated lawnmower in human history, one says. Another says, stop cutting the grass, you cretin. We have been handing out haiku cards, I'll give you some later, like clues to 1,000 quests, each poem a tiny prophecy. People grab them with their eyes closed, open them into mirrors. Serendipity is slinky here, every chance meeting a fork in the ley lines. An Italian climate analyst repeats the last line of his haiku over and over until his pizza arrives. No wings, no curtains, the great stage in an atom. Life is your ticket, life is your ticket. 7 years is not long enough. And we all know it. But this is the place where 7 impossible things happen before lunch. And every elevator ride is 10 floors higher than the last. In Dubai Airport, 3,500 miles from my front door, I sit down next to a man who lives 2 streets away from me and whose kids go to the same school. And I have to wonder, when you run towards a fire, why the rain falls in behind you. Each morning in the Northern Hemisphere, we get up, intent on making those 7 years count. When we go to bed, Millions of scientists, activists, artists rise in the southern hemisphere with the urgent sun to do the same. The fight for human survival is global and it never sleeps. Science is poetry, strategy is magic, life is your ticket, and tipping points go the other way too.
Oh, it's a wallop of that. It's a wallop of that. Gets me every time. So we've got probably like 10 minutes left. Rowan, are you good to do your piece now? Should we get you up now? So we're going to just sort of dip back in from the kind of meta, from the massive picture of COP and this sort of global challenge to one beautiful, brilliant, local example of how people were doing that on the ground. This is sort of dipping into our We Feed the UK project. Dizraeli has been working with a farm in Somerset, and I'm going to leave him to introduce and do his piece. Can you welcome Dizraeli?
Thank you so much. That was so beautiful, Liv. Thank you. So I was paired up with a guy called Fred, and Fred's family has been on the same piece of farmland for I think 5 or 6 generations, and his granddad decided he was going to bring a transformation in this farm. And the transformation that he brought was kicked all the people who were living on it off, dynamited all the hedgerows to make the pathways as broad as possible, and to make the fields accommodate combine harvesters and all the machinery of modern growth, and turned it into an industrial pig farm. So that's what Fred inherited. And when he came into the scene, he came back from agricultural college, thinking that he was going to do what his granddad had done, but better and bigger. And within 5 years, he had depression and stress-induced alopecia, and realized that it wasn't, just on a sort of personal well-being level, the way he was going to survive or maintain his family either. And so he had a bit of a road to Damascus moment, and transformed what his granddad had transformed, not back to what it was before, but to something completely different. And it's now a laboratory for developing population wheat, hyper-resilient crops of the future that can adapt to place, can adapt to different climates. So this is Fred's story. Fred says, I came back from college with my head alive. Chemical agronomy well aligned with everything I wished for. To do what Granddad did, but better. Double the yield, triple the pressure. Every solution agrochemical. Every plant genetically identical, and so much expense. Insecticide, fertilizer, fungicide, contact herbicide, molluscicide, all sprayed from the tractor that Granddad died on. Heart attack, but I'd forget that and drive on. 5 years of misery, all work, no breather, until the day I woke with stress-induced alopecia. I stared in the mirror and saw what I'd been straining against. My own farm, my own common sense. For once, I listened to the seeds. They were asking, what does this land here need? What if we develop a wheat suited to these conditions, which we can't do if we're not allowed to breed? I cancelled my contracts, and a few of us got together, collected evidence, and we lobbied DEFRA. And to our surprise, we got the laws changed. Now we can make our own mistakes, grow our own strains of grains. There is hope here. The power to regenerate the land, there is hope here. The size of a freckle on a hand, there is hope here. The soil still knows what it needs. Hush a minute. Listen close to the seeds. The seeds say, us understands. Us. Because we speak as us, not me. That the seed is a player in the great collaboration. And collaboration is the seed. More players mean more sets of skills. There are 600,000 players in our field. Come meet us. Wolf, Mariaja Toba, Norregard, Cicciarelli, Oak Farm, population wheats, crosses between many strains, many genes all jostling to be. So popping with abilities, every crop is a metropolis, bristling with possibilities. And most important, spray wizard. We do not need your weird potions poured on our feet to spring into life. We are life springs. So chuck us in the dirt and step back. We are rising. There's hope here. The power to regenerate the land. There is hope here. The size of a freckle on a hand. There is hope here. The earth still knows what it needs. Hush a minute. Listen close to the seeds. 11 a.m. Cold wind. Young wheat swaying. A winter tree like a brain on a brainstem. And look now in the farmyard, a bakery. And in it, a baker baking. Rosie, smiling at the customers she knows each, and knows country life can be lonely. But this business thrives on friendships, and it's busy baking sourdough treats with this landscape in. The grains Fred grows, she mills right here. And this croissant tastes like heaven on earth. My word, ancient and new. It tastes like actual food. And neighbors meet each other in the queue. All these dividends, returns on Rosie's investments. And the money, of course, comes in handy. As the word spreads, now she sells loaves to Bristol, and her work serves hundreds of families. And that feeds the farm, which feeds its seeds to the stone mill, and the stone mill keeps turning. There's bread, and there's bread. There's value, and there's values. And these values are earning. And Fred, from the days of being stretched, stressed, and scared, where every ghost acre was grounds for despair, clumps falling out. Now his mission animates his soul. He swears by his thick, long hair. There is hope here. The power to regenerate the land. There is hope here. The size of a freckle on a hand. There is hope here. The earth still knows what it needs. Hush a minute. Listen close to the seeds. Just a little plug as well for the Field Bakery, which is now sitting on Fred's farm and sells the most banging bread I've ever tasted in my life. So, and you can order a box from the Field Bakery to your area.
Amazing admin support Rose went on because of that. She went there with her whole family based on your poem, and she said the croissants are to die for. So, yeah.
Give it up for Dizraeli. So we're sort of wrapping up. We're wrapping up our little session together. Before we do that, I guess I just want to reflect on where this started back in that muddy field in Glastonbury, and Liv and I looking at each other going, there's got to be another story. There's got to be another way of doing this. And over the last 3 years, from that conversation, we've made over 30 films.
And I want to say that John, our filmmaker, is here, and it would be remiss not, because he has, honestly, he's worked so hard to make these incredible collection of films for us as well. So,
John Hardy. We've made 30 plus films with John. We've taken this work to 5 continents. The poems have been read or watched or listened to over 5 million times. We've had over 4,000 participants in the kind of programs that we've been doing. And all that's cool, but it's like, what is the impact? This isn't just about writing poems about the climate to make things look a little bit prettier. We want to know that these things have genuine impact in the world, and as we do that, then we can make the case for more of this, and we can make the case for more artists in this space. So, for example, Liv wrote a poem at this Environmental Funders Network conference in response to this extraordinary farmer and performed it at the end of the day. And as a direct result of that poem, one of the funders put 30 grand into this project, into this We Feed the UK project. 30 grand poem, boom, just like that. The Word Forest, who plant forests in Kenya and run education projects for women, managed to raise funds to begin planting a new forest in Kenya off the back of Zena Edwards' poem. The Met Office changed their strategy to include arts and creativity as a result of the work that we did with them. Egypt, I think we all know what happened in Egypt. The book is now taught in a university in Switzerland to undergraduates studying English, because a lot of them were rocking up with climate anxiety, and the lecturer contacted us and said, look, this is perfect. They're all coming feeling anxious about the world, but I have to teach them poetry. Now you've given us a book of poems that is going to do both those things at once. So these are just some of the real world impacts that this work, this amazing work, and that's not just to like impress you, it's impressing upon you, like what happens when we bring artists into this space. It changes things, right? It changes things, and what we're doing now is trying to make the case for more of this in all of these different spaces, and creating work for artists, because artists have superpowers, and artists are needed in all of these spaces to bring the imagination, to connect all the humans, to feel the heart as well as the head. And what we're doing is building this sort of body of work to kind of evidence that, well, it's, you know, it works, right? It works.
And just from our kitchens, me and Chris just have sort of instigated this project with some help from the Arts Council. But imagine, like, if there was like real support and real on what people can do. And we have found that every door has opened for us. Every opportunity, the most mad coincidences, like the universe is completely, the cosmic wizard has been on our side in every step of the way. Like, Chris doesn't believe in the cosmic wizard, but even he has to admit that maybe the cosmic wizard is in the room. It's been incredible, and but we've only hopefully just started.
So what's next, Liv?
Well, we have to raise quite a lot of money. It's okay because it's so easy to go to the Arts Council. They just like, it's so easy. But the next aim is that we really want to work within education, within schools where climate change is often not taught particularly well, where there's a huge sort of mental health crisis among young people. And just talking about the positive stories and the amazing solutions, and also using science and the arts together. Stop separating them off, right? Stop saying STEM over the arts. Actually, we need them together, cross-curricular. We've got Michael Rosen's support to work on a big project within schools, and we're inviting the poets.
Dizraeli and Vanessa don't know this yet, but we're going to be working with all of these poets and inviting as many of them as possible to create children's versions of the poems. Michael Rosen's going to help us do that. He's going to help edit it, and then that book will be available to all school children. We're going to work with National Poetry Day, and we're going to I'm not going to.
There's a lot going on, and we also, the plan is to train and to work with an army of hot poets. Not to use army is a difficult word, right? But Johnny Fluffy Punk says sounds like we mean business at least. But we want to train and support much more than just me and Chris, a whole wealth of poets to be able to work in the climate space, to go to conferences, to go to COP, to go to the key events, to do what we do there, which is write poetry in the moment in response to the talks, which is a really powerful thing to do. You write a poem about a sort of a big talk at COP and read it back at the end. They're like, wow, this is what poetry can do. So we want to really train poets to go into those spaces, to go into schools. We want there to be much more of us. We want to have an impact. So yeah, we're looking at how we can really impact going forward. So
if anyone's got any deep pockets.
Yeah, if anyone wants to invest in us.
But that's it. That's it for us. Thank you so much for coming and listening. I just want to say thank you to Lucy and Danny and all at Lyra Fest for putting this on. Can we show them some love, please?
And to Josie, our social media person, and to Rose. We do this on such a small team and with such amazing artists as well. And
do want to appreciate the Arts Council, actually, because the Arts Council make this happen, and they have made what we happen. And yes, you have to jump through some hoops and you have to work hard, but then you get to do the amazing thing. So thanks to the Arts Council. Thank you once more to Vanessa Kisuule. Thank you to Dizraeli.
And all we ask of you is please sign up to one of our numerous social media channels, because we would, and come and watch some of the other films. There's so many amazing stories. I've got some haiku cards if you want to have a future Taru haiku card. Then
and if you want to have a chat, we're sort of hanging around afterwards. If you want to know more about it, then just come and let's have a conversation. Hotpoets.org, or on the socials, it's at @hot_poets. Thank you so much.
Thank you.